Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. G here, going over subtracting mixed numbers with unlike denominators. So our first example is 4 8/10 and 1 3/5. A mixed number is a whole number with a fraction. We're subtracting 1 3/5 from 8/10. But we know in order to subtract or add fractions, we need to have the same denominator. So I know that if I want to get that 5 to turn into a 10, I'll multiply it by 2. But if I multiply the bottom, I have to multiply the top. So 2 over 2 is a form of 1 whole. So I can multiply this fraction by 2 over 2, a form of 1 whole. And when I multiply fractions by a form of 1 whole, I get an equivalent fraction. So I'm going to get 6/10. 3 times 2 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. I'll bring my 1 over because I can't leave my whole number. It's a mixed number, right? And we know we're subtracting. All I have to do now is bring over 4 8/10. Making sure my fractions are lined up vertically. Remembering my operation is subtraction. So 8 minus 6 is 2. The denominator stays the same. 4 minus 1 is 3. So by multiplying a fraction by a form of a whole, I get an equivalent fraction. The idea is to get a fraction with the same denominator. So I'll try that here with 7 2/8 minus 1 3/4. I recognize immediately 4 and 8 do not match. But again, if I multiply 3/4 by a form of 1 whole, I can get it to be an 8. If I know my multiples, I can skip count as well. So what happens here? I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2. 2 times 4 equals 8. 3 times 2 equals 6. I get 6/8. I bring over my 1, that's my whole number, making a new equivalent fraction with the same denominator as 7 2/8. So I'm still subtracting. I'm lining up everything vertically. But I've encountered a different problem. Now I have a numerator that is smaller than the subtracting numerator. So I can't take 6 from 2. So, like when we're borrowing and taking from place values, we're exchanging from place values, I can take a whole from the 7. I can borrow a whole from the 7. But since I'm working in eighths and I need a form of 1 whole, I need it to be an 8/8. That equals 1. So I'm going to take away 1 whole. This turns into a 6. I'm going to take it away in the form of an 8/8, right? So there's my 1. The 7 turned into a 6 because I removed 1 whole in the form of a fraction. So now I have a new fraction. I'm going to have 10. Oh, that's not 10. That didn't work out. Excuse my mistake. I'm going to have 10 over 8. Bring over my whole number to keep it a complete mixed number. 6 10/8. And now I can go 1 6/8. I can subtract that appropriately now. I have a numerator larger than my other numerator. 10 minus 6 will give me 4 over 8. 6 minus 1 will give me 5. 5 4/8. So when subtracting 7 2/8 minus 1 3/4, I'm going to have to make sure I multiply it by a form of a whole to get my new common denominator. Then I'll have to borrow from the whole in the same form of 1 whole as an eighth, and I get 6 10/8 minus 1 6/8 gives me 5 4/8. The great part about the video is you can see it more than once. We'll do one more example. You can keep reviewing, and if you have any questions, you can ask Ms. Hartwick, Ms. Curran, or Mr. Malley in regards to any different topic, and I can make a short video to give some kind of support and give you an idea of what's happening to make your remote learning a little smoother. Please excuse the back of my body, but I have to erase the board. So one more example. We'll do 4 1/6 minus 2 2/3. So again, we're keeping the numbers basic, but we understand I have to multiply by a form of a whole. So in this case, 6 and 3, they are unlike denominators. So I take this, multiply it by 2 over 2, and I'm going to come up with 4 over 6. Bring my whole number over because it's a mixed number. And now I can take 4 1/6 and subtract it. But I encounter another problem. Because the operation is subtraction, 1 and 4, I cannot take 4 away from 1. So again, I'm going to borrow from the 4 in the form of 1 whole, using the denominator 6. So 6/6 is equal to 1. It's a form of a whole. So I take my 4, turn it into a 3. I am going to add 6/6. This is why my 4 turned into a 3. So now I get 7 over 6. I bring my 3 over because it is a mixed number. I bring 2 4/6 over because now I know I have common denominators and appropriate numerators. I make sure to remember my operation being subtraction. And now 7 minus 4, that's 3. My denominator stays the same. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 3/6. And for some of you who know how to reduce fractions, you recognize that this is 1 3/6, but it's also 1 1/2. I hope this short video helps. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Mrs. Harwick, Ms. Carter, Mr. Malley. Have a great day.